Wednesday. The showers mostly of rain, but increasingly turning to snow across northern Scotland during Wednesday evening, and just the threat of a bit more snow pushing south during Wednesday night and into Thursday morning. So chance it could be a bit icy on Thursday morning. There could be some snow around. Overall Thursday, though, looking like a dry and a bright day for many with plenty of wintry sunshine. Bye for now.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
A very good afternoon. It is 3 o'clock. You're watching GB News and the briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey. In the next hour, we'll be debating whether you should be limiting your contacts over the next couple of weeks in the run-up to Christmas. It certainly caused a row at Westminster. We'll be bringing you the latest from that parliamentary debate as the government looks to impose restrictions, and Labour's reshuffle. What did you make of that? Plus, the Prime Minister due to address the nation live from Downing Street within the next hour. That and much more after the news with Rosie Wright at 3.
Good afternoon. Let's get you up to date. The Prime Minister says the government is not changing its guidance on how people live their lives, and it's down to individuals to decide whether they go ahead with Christmas parties. His comments follow the reintroduction of COVID restrictions after 14 cases of the Omicron variant were discovered in the UK. Face coverings are now compulsory in shops and on public transport across England, and all travellers to the UK have to self-isolate until they receive a negative PCR result.
Not going to change the overall guidance. We don't think that's necessary. We don't see anything to suggest that we need to go, for instance, to Plan B. But what we do need to do is take particular precautions against Omicron until we've worked out exactly what kind of a threat it may present. But whatever kind of a threat it may present, Sam, the crucial thing to do is for everybody to go out and get vaccinated.
MPs will vote on the new COVID restrictions this afternoon. One Conservative MP, Anne-Marie Morris, told us she won't back the bill.
No, I won't be supporting the government. I will be abstaining because I do not believe at the moment what is being proposed is proportionate. It is something which I think may result in more than just the wearing of masks. I think what it may land up with is schools closing. It may land up with the plays at schools being cancelled. It may land up with, if you like, the unintentional cancellation of Christmas.
And there's been mixed reaction from the public.
I think it's somewhat pointless as the virus is too small in diameter. It'll pass through most fabrics. Most people aren't wearing masks correctly. And it just seems pointless as to why we're doing it. It just seems a knee-jerk reaction from a virus that's potentially milder than the one that's circulating.
I think it's a good idea. They do protect other people and me as well. I think, I'm convinced that they do. It's a good idea, and they're brought in at the right time as well, I think.
I think they should have never stopped it. Never. And people are just, you look around, they're so complacent, but it can happen to anybody. We should all do it.
Well, I think it's a good thing. We've got to look after each other. The world's so much different now, and I obviously don't like wearing a mask because it makes you feel a bit sort of closed in, but I don't want to catch anything.
We've never stopped wearing them, but I think it's a good... Well, I think the government have acted quite well, to be quite honest with you, especially with Christmas coming up. It's just a bit of extra protection for people, isn't it?
Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon updated Holyrood on the latest COVID developments and says overall infection levels have been falling over the last week, but she urged caution.
I very much hope that as we do learn more, our level of concern will diminish rather than increase. However, while hoping very much for the best, I think it is prudent at this stage to contemplate and prepare for something that is less positive than that.
Meanwhile, Munster's rugby plans to return home from South Africa, they've been derailed after a further 9 players tested positive for coronavirus. They'll now relocate to a quarantine hotel in Cape Town, where they'll join the first player who tested positive on Sunday. The remaining 38 players and staff have all returned negative results and continue to isolate in their rooms. Now, in other news, French police have demolished a makeshift migrant camp near the Channel port of Dunkirk. Armed officers in protective suits pulled down tents and shelters along a disused railway line. The action comes as France opens the door to talks with the UK, saying it's written a letter to Boris Johnson with proposals to tackle the migrant crisis. Retailers are making a shocking profit on petrol, according to the RAC. The motoring body says fuel is around 12 pence a litre too expensive, and it estimates 19 pence profit is being made on every litre, 3 times more than before the pandemic. Oil prices fell last Friday, and the RAC says retailers will lose credibility if that's not reflected at the pump this week. Prince Charles acknowledged the appalling atrocity of slavery in Barbados as the country became a republic. During a ceremony to mark the occasion, the Prince of Wales said this was now a new beginning for the nation. Its first ever president, Dame Sandra Mason, has now replaced the Queen as head of state. Editor-in-chief of Majesty magazine, Ingrid Seward, says the decision to part ways wasn't unanimous.
If people want to break and make themselves free from the crown and have a president, which they have now, they have Sandra Mason, who is very, very popular. But the sad thing, I think, is it wasn't a vote by the people, it was a vote by the government. So the people of Barbados, they love the Queen. And it used to be called Little England. The island is very English in its way. But it wasn't a referendum like we had here. It was a decision by the government.
You're up to date here on GB News. Now back to the briefing with Darren McCaffrey.
Yeah, hello and welcome to the Briefing PM, your afternoon fix of all the latest political debate and analysis here on GB News. I'm Darren McCaffrey. Here's what's coming up over the next hour. Well, that long-anticipated debate on COVID regulations is currently happening in the House of Commons. We're expecting a vote around 4 p.m. We'll bring you the latest and coverage of what's being discussed by MPs this afternoon. Also, we'll cover Labour's big reshuffle. Some big names from the Brown era are back in big jobs, and some of the left-wingers seem to be kicked out. We'll look at what this means for Labour and whether they're ready to fight the next election. And we'll give you the very latest from Scotland. Nicola Sturgeon's been talking to MSPs in the last hour. We'll be speaking to the leader of the Scottish Conservatives COVID recovery team for his thoughts. As always, we want to hear what you've got to say. Please do get in touch. Email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tweet me at GBNews. Very good afternoon and welcome to the programme on this Tuesday. Yeah, thank you very much indeed for your company. Now, MPs today have been debating the reintroduction of COVID restrictions in England, including mandatory masks and self-isolation, before voting on measures at around 4 p.m. this afternoon. The Prime Minister is also set to deliver a press conference this afternoon. We'll bring you that live, of course, here on GB News. That's within the next hour or so. He has released a statement ahead of that, talking to reporters this morning. He said what he wanted to do was essentially urge people to be more cautious in the days and weeks to come. However, most of the debate today and part of that MP statement has been occupied by what Dr. Jenny Harris had to say. Now, she's the Chief Executive of the UK Health Security Agency, and this is what she had to say this morning. She said that the government has not thus far limited social contact or demanded working from home. However, she did suggest that maybe that's what people might want to think about doing as we get concerned about this new COVID variant. Let's have a listen.
We've made huge progress. We have great defences, and in the background, the dominant strain in the UK at the moment is very definitely Delta. So these vaccines will help that. It will keep serious infection, serious disease and hospitalisations at bay. But we do need this time to try and understand the new variant, and we would much prefer that we have that precautionary approach and then take appropriate action.
So that was Dr. Jenny Harris, who's the Chief Executive of the UK Health Security Agency, speaking on the BBC's Today programme this morning. Now, the Prime Minister was asked about this a little bit later, and while he didn't entirely endorse what she was saying, he did seem to suggest that actually caution is the watchword. Let's have a listen to the...
Changing.
Oh, well, I don't think we can listen to what the Prime Minister had to say, but essentially what he was arguing for was for us to take caution, and hopefully we'll be able to bring you a little bit of what the Prime Minister said later. And I think we can. When I say later, I mean now. Let's have a watch.
Not changing the guidance on how you should basically be living your life, except in a couple of ways, and that's to do with putting a mask on in some contexts, such as retail and public transport, to stop transmission, and also making sure that we check people when they arrive into the country. Because what we're trying to deal with here is the potential threat from Omicron, and what we need to do is delay the seeding of Omicron in this country. That's why tough checks at the borders are so important. But we don't see any need at present, certainly, to change the overall guidance about how people should be living their lives. And provided people continue to be cautious and sensible, we think that's the right approach. Because if you look at what's happening with the overall state of the pandemic, the Delta, our strategy for fighting the Delta version, the one that's been most dominant for a while now, has basically been working, and there's no doubt at all that though cases are high, the numbers of people being admitted to hospital, numbers of people being admitted to ICU, and sadly number of people dying, those numbers have all been coming down. So it continues to go in the right direction. What we need to do is to take special measures now to protect against the arrival of Omicron, to delay until we've established exactly what we're dealing with. And so we need the scientists at Porton Down, we need the scientists in the vaccine companies to work out exactly to what extent this new variant, Omicron, may escape the vaccines. And that means, and there are ways in which it can escape. It can either be more transmissible, or else, of course, it can cause more serious illness and death. And I just want to stress, whatever the risks, the answer is everywhere and always to get the booster, because we think that it's overwhelmingly likely that the booster, getting vaccinated will give you more protection. It's always sensible to be careful, and I think what Jenny is saying there is right. You know, we've been living with a pandemic for a long time. People should continue to do things like make sure they have lots of fresh air, they wash their hands, and take normal precautions. I think that's entirely reasonable, but we're not going to change the overall guidance. We don't think that's necessary. We don't see anything to suggest that we need to go, for instance, to Plan B. But what we do need to do is take particular precautions against Omicron until we've worked out exactly what kind of a threat it may present. But whatever kind of a threat it may present, Sam, the crucial thing to do is for everybody to go out and get vaccinated. And yes, it's going to be a big campaign, and it will absorb a huge amount of effort, but I've no doubt that the NHS, the volunteers, and everybody else can do it. I think what Stéphane Bancel was saying is probably right, but you need to look at what he's not necessarily saying that this will mean that the vaccines are ineffective against serious illness or death, and they may be less effective in preventing transmission. We see some evidence from South Africa that it's the virus Omicron is transmitted between people who have been vaccinated, but it's not clear to what extent this means that you're going to pick up a severe case of Omicron, or that will have a problem with serious illness and death.
There you go. That's the Prime Minister speaking a little earlier today. As I've been saying, MPs have been debating in the Commons about these coronavirus restrictions that came into place at 4 a.m. This morning. Let's listen in. I think Steve Baker, the MP, is speaking in the Commons now.
To do the right thing, to wear a mask when it's sensible, to pay attention to the level of cases, to choose for themselves whether or not they go to a restaurant, and so on and so on. Indeed, to choose whether they go and visit vulnerable relations in care homes. There's a sad story I could tell about that.
Absolutely.
But I do just need to put on the record, before I finish with my final thought, just one constituent case, because I've got a 75-year-old constituent stranded in South Africa with flights out of the country cancelled. He's got a pre-existing anxiety disorder, and in a matter of days he's going to run out of medication. He's struggling to find accommodation, and he now has to find a local source of new prescription medication. Now, if that man is suffering for the greater good, Mr. Deputy Speaker, let my honourable friend the Minister say so. Let her say so. Because actually, I think the rights of these individuals really matter. I think justice is about how individuals are treated. And yet, of course, we should care about overall social outcomes. But it really matters what the rights of the individual are and how we treat those people. And that man matters. He shouldn't be stuck in South Africa in the way that he is. He planned to go there to come back, and his plans have been cut short, causing him immense suffering. I believe that there is no plausible path set out before us which leads to a genuine public health emergency, and yet the government is choosing to react in the way that it has. So I think, as a result, the government, I'm afraid, once again is choosing that downward path towards, frankly, hell. The hell of minute management of our lives by edict, with nothing we can do about it, and not even a say in advance in Parliament. And incredibly, a clear majority of this House is going along with it. Some of us today have got to take a decision to vote no to everything, because I, for one, intend to chart a course towards heaven, and I hope honourable members will come with me.
Dr. Ben Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And it's
There we go. There's Steve Baker, who's clearly not going to vote with the government today when it comes to what the proposals in terms of restrictions. Of course, this is going to come in retrospectively in some regards, as in the restrictions came in at 4 a.m. this morning. Parliament only voting them on today. And Hugh Merriman, Steve Bryan, Mark Harper, some other Conservative MPs also saying that they're concerned about the pandemic effect will return if people have to self-isolate when coming into contact with a suspected case. Well, let's get reaction to all that we've heard over the last couple of minutes. Let's go to Henry Hill. He's the news editor at Conservative Home, and also to Professor David Patton from Nottingham University. Good afternoon to both of you, gentlemen. Henry, let's start with you there. Maybe not a surprise with what Steve Baker had to say in the Commons, but there is this kind of rump of Conservative MPs who really are not very happy that these restrictions are being imposed again, and that Parliament is debating it after the events.
Yeah, I think there's sort of two
levels of objection, as you allude to, on the Conservative benches. On the one hand, there is a minority, it has to be said, of Conservative MPs who are strongly opposed to restrictions themselves, who are worried that this is becoming sort of a mission creep. You know, originally these public health measures were supposed to be an acute response to a crisis until we had more sustainable measures in place, and they're worried that the government's going to resort to them too easily. But the others, on a similar but sort of slightly different level, worry about the fact that the government isn't subjecting these to the proper scrutiny that we should have. These were set aside in the summer. There was an argument to be made that actually these powers should have lapsed, that the Secretary of State should have given them up, and if a new crisis emerged, then the Secretary of State should have to go back to Parliament, have a full procedure, full debate, and win support from MPs again. Instead, the government decided to keep all of these measures on the statute book, and the Secretary of State can resort to them. And as you say, now MPs are stuck scrutinising them after the fact, and soon, you know, Parliament's going to break up for Christmas, and then in the middle of a winter crisis, and the Secretary of State will have an enormous amount of discretionary power there. So that, I think, is the concern. It's simply the fact that, you know, there may always be a area. You know, we don't know if in 6 to 8 months' time there might not be some other mutation. How long are we going to keep these laws on the statute book to allow the government not necessarily to object to the principle of the measure, but to allow them to be brought in this way with so little scrutiny?
David, in saying that, you know, we have a debate about the scrutiny, and it's really important, is it, of course, in a parliamentary democracy, that it probably shouldn't happen after the event. But in the end, it seems that not only just MPs, but most of the public are pretty much on board with this. If anything, the public are still more cautious than the government.
Well, that may be true, but that doesn't excuse the government a really serious evaluation of the effectiveness of the measures they're proposing. And I think Steve Baker hit on an interesting point when he worried that the government is going to make the same mistakes it's made over the past 18 months. The biggest of which has been this assumption that the government can sort of control the virus, that the measures they impose, be it a curfew, be it masks, be it Scotch egg rules, can limit the virus going up or down, when all the evidence suggests that these measures have very little, if any, impact. And I think there was sort of good and bad in what the Prime Minister said. It was reassuring to hear him say that there's no plans to move to Plan B, to the idea of vaccine passports. But then that does raise the question of why on Saturday they seemed to panic and introduce masks again. So for the last 4 months we've been open, we've had no masks in England, whereas Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland to a greater or lesser extent have had masks, even stricter rules in Ireland and Germany. And yet in England we've seen cases no worse over that period than in other of the nations, and certainly in Ireland and Germany, the mask rules have done nothing to stop cases surging.
I mean, David, come on. We know, for example, that actually England has had, and the UK has had, some of the highest incident rates over recent months. You say that measures don't work, though. We look at Germany, it's seen the first decline in its overall rate since early November. Austria is now seeing a decline in its rate, and Holland has seen its slowest weekly growth since October. Is it all just a coincidence that those 3 countries have introduced restrictions in the last couple of weeks?
Yes, pretty much. So we saw Germany had fairly tight restrictions. So Germany, all those countries, for example, had vaccine passports, which is a big thing that this is going to stop infection surging. We saw a huge increase in infections in all those countries over that time. Now, what we've seen typically is infections rise and fall over time. They go in waves. We can see in Scotland, infections have been falling over the past week, even though they've not increased their restrictions recently. In England, there's the first signs that infections may be going down. In England, deaths have been going down for the past 3 weeks. You're right, infections are high. I think the big difference is what we saw in the summer is that the government decided to open up and say, well, you know, we can experience increases or decreases in infections without having to resort to new measures and new restrictions. And to some extent, that's been fairly successful. We've seen big increases in infections and some decreases in England, but we've seen those decreases without having new measures. And we haven't, of course, seen the huge increase in hospitalizations and deaths that we saw back in January. So, yeah, you look across Europe, cases go up hugely, irrespective of whether what the restrictions are, and then they will come down again, irrespective of what governments do. By and large, doesn't mean there's absolutely zero effect, but certainly no material observable effect.
Well, we must say, of course, that epidemiologists who study this, most of them would disagree with you, but always appreciate your thoughts. And we're going to stay with you throughout the programme. Henry and David, please do stay up, because we have to take a break here on GB News on the briefing this afternoon. We'll, of course, be going back into the Commons ahead of that vote. We are going to hear from the Prime Minister live from Downing Street within the next hour as well. But up next, we're going to be looking at Labour and its reshuffle. Has Keir Starmer done a good thing? Has he got his party into line, made some mistakes? We'll be looking at that in just a couple of minutes. But first, here's the weather. It's rather drab Tuesday from the Met Office.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. Temperatures up and down a lot this week. It's much milder today, but it's going to be colder tomorrow, and that's because we're going to see some heavy rain and strong winds whipping across the country tonight, courtesy of this cold front, which then also introduces that colder air. As the low pressure develops in the North Sea, some very strong winds are likely through the night across the coasts of northeast England, so that isn't helping matters, especially after the recent damage from Storm Arwen. As well as the wind, it is going to turn wet, already very soggy across Northern Ireland, that rain spreading into Scotland, and then a band of rain whizzing across England and Wales overnight, accompanied by some very, very gusty winds. The winds suddenly whipping up across the south in particular. It will turn colder, but that wind should help to keep the temperatures a few degrees above freezing, although it will make it feel cold first thing. There's very lively winds for a time in the morning across that northeastern coast of England, but it's a blustery day wherever you are tomorrow. Some sunshine, yes, but also plenty of showers, particularly in the west and across the north. And in northern Scotland, those showers turning more and more to sleet and snow, even to low levels by the end of the day. Elsewhere, the showers will be of rain, maybe hail, and temperatures back down to single figures. Add on that wind and it feels even colder. Bit of showery rain across the southwest on Wednesday evening, but then another little set of weather features just push southwards during Wednesday night. That'll bring a mixture of rain, sleet and some snow for a time inland over northwest England, perhaps parts of Wales as we head through into Thursday morning. With temperatures down close to freezing, that could turn things really quite icy on Thursday morning. Potential for a covering of snow, parts of the Midlands and possibly even for a time across parts of the south on Thursday morning. Once that's out of the way, many places fine and sunny on Thursday, but it will be cold. Another weather system will bring more rain into the west later on, but eventually also more milder air.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
I think you'll be happy in the future too.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk. Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Very good afternoon. It is Tuesday. You're watching GB News, The Briefing, with me, Darren McCaffrey. Thank you for your company. Well, the other big story today is, of course, that Labour Party reshuffle. We've seen a number of big hitters come back into the fold, being promoted for what looks like another cut, it must be said, to Corbyn's Labour left. Is this Keir Starmer's? And it is the second reshuffle in the space of 6 months. And there are winners and losers, as in any reshuffle. Let's have a look at some of the winners from yesterday. Well, the biggest move is, of course, comes as Yvette Cooper returns to the front bench as Shadow Home Secretary. David Lammy moves up as Shadow Foreign Secretary, making his debut this morning in Parliament at the Foreign Affairs Questions in the Commons. Wes Streeting gets the Shadow Health Secretary post. He is, of course, one of Keir Starmer's prodigies. And Bridget Phillipson has been promoted to Shadow Education Secretary. There were also those that might be a little less happy. Nick Thomas-Symonds, well, he got demoted to Shadow International Trade Secretary. Ed Miliband, former leader, spent an awful lot of time at COP26. Well, he's now lost the business brief, but is keeping his road to net zero, being Shadow Climate Change Secretary. Lord Charlie Faulkner is on his way out, though I think he'll probably keep his legal work on the side. And Kate Green, who was until yesterday the Shadow Education Secretary, has now been ousted from the front bench entirely. Well, join me now to discuss all of this is Scarlett Maguire, a former Labour advisor. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. So I was suggesting there that this is a return to some of the big hitters from the kind of, for the last 10 years of Labour politics. Is that fair to say? I mean, Yvette Cooper back in...
Well, it's only Yvette, actually. I mean, what's so interesting about this is he's brought Yvette back, a serious big hitter who's been doing incredible work as chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee. I mean, she has been a far better opponent to Priti Patel than Nick Thomas-Symonds.
As chair of the Home Affairs...
rather than the Shadow Home Secretary, who frankly, I mean, outside the few of us who are sort of political junkies, I don't think anybody's heard of. So she came back, but that's about it. The rest of the people are new. I mean, people like Wes Streeting, Bridget Phillipson, I mean, they're in their 30s. They're being promoted. I mean, quite rightly, Keir needs a new cabinet full of very enthusiastic people.
And vigorous opponents. In saying that, is this because we're talking there about the mess that was 6 months ago when Angela Rayner objected and all that sort of stuff? Is this the kind of the shadow cabinet Keir Starmer probably always wanted?
I think so. I mean, I certainly know that he wanted to move an awful lot more people. I wasn't sure about Nick Thomas-Symonds 6 months ago, but I do think that, I mean, he said he needs people who are good on the media. If you're in opposition, you only have the media to get your message across. You can't do lots of policy work. You can do opposition. So you really need good media performance. And Nick Thomas-Symonds just never quite got there. He never made the cut through. But I think Keir was very loyal to him for a long time and frankly wouldn't hear a word against him. But I think now is the time. So how much was supposed to happen in the last reshuffle? Certainly the last reshuffle did not go the way Keir wanted.
This one went reasonably smoothly, even with the incident with Angela Rayner yesterday morning. Looking at some of the right-wing press, The Times, The Sun, today, they've actually been quite, and in the last couple of weeks, quite complimentary about Keir Starmer, saying that this is a cabinet that, is a bit more on election footing, that he's speaking to business in a good way. His Commons performance has improved. Is there a sense that Keir Starmer's now kind of getting into his stride as leader of the opposition?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that the last few Prime Minister's questions, he's done incredibly well, and finally he's understood that Boris Johnson doesn't ever answer. So you have to have your ripostes in instead of thinking that like a lawyer, you think, oh, this is a devastating question, it'll kill him. Well, it doesn't, right? And it hasn't. But now Keir Starmer is really good at that. His personal ratings have gone up. The polling is better. He's much, much more confident. And so it was time that he actually got the shadow cabinet that he wants to go into the next election with. And that's what he's determined to do. He needs really, really good performers who are going to cut through.
Really fascinating stuff, but at the same time, he's got a mountain to climb, hasn't he? And some would suggest he should be much better ahead in the polls quickly. That, an 80-seat majority, that is going to be nigh impossible to overturn.
Well, we never know. We do have a government that to call it incompetent and underperforming is being quite kind, right? Everything that Boris Johnson touches just sort of falls to dust. He couldn't even do a speech to the CBI after everything else that has gone wrong. So actually, what this country needs is it needs competence, and that's what Keir offers.
Well, we'll see. Scarlett, sorry. Thank you very much, Scarlett Maguire, there, former Labour advisor on Labour's reshuffle. And we'll get to see more of those front benches, of course, as they come out over the coming days and answer questions in the Commons and in the media. OK, you're watching The Briefing here on GB News. We're going to be returning, in fact, to the Commons. That debate, we're expecting a vote on the coronavirus restrictions, also due to hear from the Prime Minister from Downing Street. But before all that, let's get the news just after 3:30. Here's Simon.
Thank you, Darren. Yes, I'm Simon Pusey, and here are your latest news headlines. The Prime Minister says the government is not changing its guidance on how people live their lives, and it's down to individuals to decide whether they go ahead with Christmas parties. His comments follow the reintroduction of COVID restrictions after 14 cases of the Omicron variant were discovered in the UK. Face coverings are now compulsory in shops and public transport across England. All travellers to the UK also have to self-isolate until they receive a negative PCR result. MPs will vote on the new COVID restrictions this afternoon.
Not going to change the overall guidance. We don't think that's necessary. We don't see anything to suggest that we need to go, for instance, to Plan B. But what we do need to do is take particular precautions against Omicron until we've worked out exactly what kind of a threat it may present. But whatever kind of a threat it may present, Sam, the crucial thing to do is for everybody to go out and get vaccinated.
French police have demolished a makeshift migrant camp near the Channel port of Dunkirk. The action comes as France opens the door to talks with the UK, saying it's writing a letter to Boris Johnson with proposals to tackle the migrant crisis. Retailers are making a shocking profit on petrol, that's according to the RAC. The motoring body says fuel is around 12 pence a litre too expensive, and it estimates 19 pence profit is being made on every litre, 3 times more than before the pandemic. And Prince Charles has acknowledged the appalling atrocity of slavery in Barbados during a ceremony marking its transition to a republic. The nation's first ever president, Dame Sandra Mason, has replaced the Queen as the head of state. That's it from me. We'll have a full update for you a little later on.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk. Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello and welcome back to the briefing here on GB News. Now, there has been this big debate today about what precisely the advice should be when it comes to contacts in the days and weeks ahead with the new COVID variant spreading across Britain. We heard from Jenny Harris a little bit earlier on saying that she thought people should be cautious. The Prime Minister seemed somewhat to back her. That did anger, though, some Conservative backbenchers who've been debating in the Commons today the new restrictions that have come into place in England. Let's have a listen in to some of those angry Tories.
Will she deprecate those public appointees who, notwithstanding the clear proportionate advice of the Chief Scientific Advisor, have been out on the airwaves telling people that they shouldn't socialise to the huge detriment of people's well-being and an industry struggling to recover from earlier lockdowns?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the people he's referring to will have heard him very loud and clear. We all do enjoy socialising, but as my rational friends will appreciate, that we are in a difficult situation at the moment, but we have personal responsibility as well.
She mentioned the Health Security Agency, and it was the head of that agency that I think my right honourable friend was referring to. I listened very carefully to the Minister's answer. Dr Harris said two things this morning. She said people shouldn't socialise, and she also implied, to be fair, only implied that people should work from home. Now, the Prime Minister was asked about this and made it very clear that was not the government's position and that people should follow the advice. I listened carefully to what the Minister said. I don't think that's quite what she said. Could she be clear that Dr Harris was only speaking for herself? She was not speaking for the government.
As the right honourable gentleman said, that what the Prime Minister has said is that we're putting these measures in place, which I will talk more about, and I cannot speak for any other person who goes on the airwaves.
Dr Harris is a health professional. She's a public health professional and therefore really does understand what public health measures need to be taken to secure our well-being against this pandemic. So why isn't the government listening to what public health professionals are advising?
But what we're debating today are statutory instruments on face coverings and self-isolation following travel. I'll give way to...
I'm grateful to her, but is she seriously saying that it's not for ministers to have any particular view on officials employed within the department going out and taking a position which is at odds with the government's public policy position? Because if that really is now the policy that we've got, that even employees of departments can take their own personal positions, we really are facing chaos and an overturning of long-standing government principles.
I would like to reiterate that I cannot speak for other people, but what I am doing today is putting out the measures that we have implemented as from this morning in a timely fashion, and I think it is the measures that we are considering today. We are committed to reviewing these measures in 3 weeks' time, when further scientific analysis should help us determine whether these measures are still needed or whether they need to be extended or strengthened to support us in our wider fight against COVID-19.
Well, delighted to say that both Henry and David are with me again. Henry Hill, who's the news editor concerned with the Home, and Professor David Payton from Nottingham University. A very good afternoon again to both of you gentlemen. David, can I start with you first of all? Just in regards to this idea about public messaging, we heard there from a lot of Conservative MPs who are pretty angry. But is there an understanding, actually, when there is an awful lot of uncertainty, public messaging can't be that clear-cut, can it?
I think there is a problem with government messaging and some of the messaging from scientists, and they seem to rely a little bit too much on sort of panic and trying to induce fear as a way of manipulating behaviour. That's been the pattern over the past 18 months. And that does have quite serious consequences. Obviously, immediately that introduces a problem for businesses. They have loss of confidence. We see pubs reporting bookings being cancelled and people cancelling social events. So it does have very significant consequences. But I think there's also a longer term problem that when you constantly get this barrage of fear, and we know it's been a deliberate tactic of the government to try and sort of change behaviour, to manipulate behaviour, there is a danger that you end up losing trust of people in public health messaging more generally, and also in what messages the government give out. So I think you're playing a little bit of a dangerous game by always promoting the fear and overemphasising the problems that we might face. I think what people would appreciate is being realistic. Let's hear the good news as well as the bad news. Let's hear the good news stories that hospitalizations are falling and deaths are falling at the moment, even though cases remain relatively high. And give us straightforward, correct data and information to help people make their decisions about how best to live their lives.
Henry, obviously we're going to hear from the Prime Minister in the next couple of minutes from Downing Street. He's got used to making these press conferences again, though. But according to your poll today, Conservative Home have got a poll out saying that support amongst Tory members has fallen quite dramatically. We don't think linked to the pandemic, rather what's happened in the last couple of weeks of politics. But is this yet again a dangerous time for the Prime Minister?
Yes, it is. And I think the fact that the Prime Minister has suffered so many self-inflicted blows over the past few weeks has actually restricted his room for manoeuvre on coronavirus. Because I think if you look back to maybe 3 weeks ago, before the Owen Paterson stuff kicked off, the Prime Minister was talking about dark clouds are gathering, and it maybe looked as if he was starting to lay the foundations for a shift back towards some kind of restrictions. That talk stopped the moment that the Owen Paterson thing got serious, because ultimately what's happened is that the government only has so much unpopularity that it can politically sustain, and it used up a load of it on that crisis, meaning that doing something incredibly unpopular like bringing back lockdown or anything else became a lot more relatively difficult than it would have been previously. I think the problem for the government is that when things are uncertain, and things are currently uncertain, that's actually the time that you really need clear government communication the most, because the members of the public will be getting information from different sources. Many of them, including me, and the vast majority of the population won't be trained specialists. They might not know how to interpret the various things that they're reading. And it's really crucial that the government is giving clear advice. And it's very unfortunate that what appears to have happened is that we've developed a system wherein different bits of the government, different advisors, they all take their stories to the press, and we end up with this very confusing and, yes, often sometimes quite worrying mess. The government is in a very tricky spot, and I think that one of the things that will be animating Conservative MPs right now is that one of the things that really dented Boris Johnson's perception and standing with the country last year was cancelling Christmas at zero notice. And I think that there will be a huge internal resistance amongst the Conservatives, not just for public health reasons, but for political reasons, to anything that looks as if it will lead to the Prime Minister cancelling a second Christmas in a row. Because, doing it once when we didn't know what the pandemic was about, that's maybe forgivable. But being 2 years into this crisis and still not being able to see our loved ones at Christmas, I don't think that's going to go down well.
Well, let's hope we don't end up there. I think we can definitely all agree on that. Henry Hill, from Conservative Home and Professor David Patton from Nottingham University. Thank you both very much indeed. Appreciate your thoughts and views and different perspectives here on the briefing this afternoon. OK, well, we've heard what MPs and commentators have had to say here in London, but what has been the reaction to the new restrictions around the country? Our GB News reporters have been asking members of the public around the United Kingdom what they think of the new measures. Well, I think this is what the people of Bolton had to say, apparently.
As a young person, I'm quite worried because, well, we don't know much about it, so I'm just being cautious.
We're the younger generation, and I haven't taken the vaccine yet, so I'm not really that worried about it, to be honest. Yeah.
I'm not worried, but I do think there'll be another lockdown.
What are your thoughts on face coverings becoming mandatory in bus stations, on buses, and in shops again? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't really like wearing them, but if I have to, I will do. Well, I'd like to see everything go back to normal. That's the whole point of having your jabs, I think.
Some people will be used to it, so they'll just like, okay, it's going to happen. It was going to happen anyway. But for me, I didn't even expect it because it's like 1 minute I'm going to college, just like every other person, like my age, and then I get a message from my mum saying that she found out on social media that the face masks were being brought in on Monday, and it's like, well, that's new.
The people of Bolton there. This is what the people of Yorkshire had to say.
I don't mind wearing them at all. I think protecting yourself and protecting other people as well. I've had all the jabs and boosters, so you just have to go with it.
I feel once it's going to save the life of people, then it's fine. It's fine. That's my own opinion.
What's your take on these new rules around masks?
It's actually indifferent. That's it, basically. Yeah, I've got other things to think about that are more concerning than wearing a mask.
I don't mind. I'm a student, and so we've always been wearing like masks and stuff in lecture halls anyway, so it won't be any different for me, and I'm like happy to carry on wearing it in shops because I've been doing that anyway. So yeah.
Well, anything that might stop things passing on is a good idea.
There we go, the people of Yorkshire. Well, let's go now to Bradley Harris. He is our North West of England reporter and joins us now live. Good afternoon to you, Bradley. Anecdotally, when I got my train into work this morning, it was notable how many more people were wearing face masks. What's the reaction that you found out and about?
Yeah, Darren, it's interesting, isn't it, this shift now into the evening and people's reaction to these new measures. When I was here at Bolton Interchange station that's just behind me at 6 a.m. this morning, people were coming in with a surprised look on their face when they were being offered a face covering, saying, why do I need one of these? Many people didn't even know that these new restrictions were enforced from 4 a.m. this morning. Now, though, buses are going past me. I can see one now that, in fact, most people looking through the window have face coverings on. A bus driver that I spoke to earlier on today said that every passenger that boarded his bus on the route today had a face covering on. So it seems like people are starting to pick up on the restrictions that are enforced today and are sticking to the rules. But there are certainly people here in Bolton that have said, look, we've been here before. You know, it's a few weeks before Christmas and here we go again. Another sign of COVID getting in the way of people's plans this Christmas. Although some people are saying, look, if all it takes is to put a face covering on in shops, on public transport to get and see my family this year, so be it. But actually, there are some people who have said, I've had enough. I want to get back to life as normal. I don't want to wear a face covering anymore. And you can't blame them. Places like Bolton are where people have actually seen the virus the most. Bolton was, in fact, one of the places that had the most cases of coronavirus. So you can understand why people are just ready to get back to normal now as we come to the end of this year.
Yeah, indeed, Bradley. And just very quickly, what's the sense about the mixed messaging when it comes, or the seemingly mixed messaging when it comes to contacts and meeting people in the days to come?
Yeah, well, at the moment, the restrictions are still in England 1 metre plus. That's always been around. That's not a new measure today. Certainly, people are still meeting up. People are meeting up at the bus station to go and meet friends later on. Many people off to the Trafford Centre in Manchester via bus to go and meet their friends and meeting up. So certainly, people are still meeting up with friends and family as normal. At the moment, there is a big sign behind me, but that's mainly to do with vaccinations, not to do with contacts and meeting people. So I think there is mixed messaging around it, and certainly people are probably confused by the comms from the government.
OK, Bradley, thank you very much indeed. Bradley Harris there joining us from Manchester. We should bring up today that MPs are currently voting on those measures in the Commons, those restrictions that, of course, came in at 4 a.m. Today. It'll probably not come as a surprise, despite some of the dissenting voices within the Conservative Party, that it is likely, almost certainly, to pass through the Commons with a thumping majority. We'll give you those results as soon as we get them. Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, also due to give a briefing from Downing Street in the next 10 minutes or so. But we've also heard today from Nicola Sturgeon. She's been speaking in Scotland. Of course, 3 more cases of the Omicron COVID-19 variant have been identified there. It takes the UK's total to 14, and we believe that it may all have originated from the one event, that these are not linked to travel, but actually a sign of community transition. We're delighted to say that Murdo Fraser, who is a Scottish MSP, joins me down the line. Murdo, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Just give a sense of what the political mood there is in Scotland. Is it significantly different from down here in London?
Well, as you've just said, there are 9 confirmed cases in Scotland now, and that is a cause for concern. Although we do know that these are all linked and came from one single private event, and there's no evidence at the moment that this came from international travel. So I think we are right to be cautious and concerned about this. It is not a time to panic. It is not a time to bring in extreme new measures at this point, because we don't at this point know much about this new Omicron variant. We don't know how transmissible it is. We don't know what the impact will be on individuals who could contract it. So I think it's appropriate to be cautious, to take precautionary steps, but not to go too far, because we know that every time a new restriction is brought in, that comes at a cost. It comes at an economic cost. For example, I was speaking to somebody yesterday involved in the travel industry in Scotland, who has a party of visitors arriving from France this week. Already they're being told they will have to undergo a PCR test now on day 2, which is a new development. And Nicola Sturgeon yesterday was suggesting that we should introduce an 8-day quarantine for visitors from all other countries. Now, that's not something the Scottish Conservatives could support, because that would wipe out the travel industry at a time when already it's been suffering considerably over the last 2 years. So I think a measured and balanced approach is correct until we fully understand what the impact of this new virus variant is.
Just very, very quickly, Murdo, if you can, in 20 seconds, because we're very tight for time. Is your expectation, though, that Nicola Sturgeon, yet again, will potentially take a more cautious approach than Boris Johnson has done, as she has done throughout this pandemic?
Well, that's been the trend so far. I have to say there's very little evidence that suggests that taking that very cautious approach delivers better outcomes in terms of tackling COVID, in terms of reducing the number of cases. So let's see what she does. But my view is people are sick and fed up of the restrictions, and we should not go too far in restricting people further until we know what the real threat is from this new variant.
OK, Murdo, really appreciate your time. Murdo Fraser there, a Conservative MP joining us. We should say that 8 further cases of that variant have now been confirmed in England in the last couple of minutes, bringing the total to 13 in England. That is it for today. We'll be back again tomorrow at 3. Boris Johnson is live from Downing Street in just a couple of minutes. That's with Alex. But first, here is the weather from the Met Office.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. Temperatures up and down a lot this week. It's much milder today, but it's going to be colder tomorrow, and that's because we're going to see some heavy rain and strong winds whipping across the country tonight. courtesy of this cold front, which then also introduces that colder air. As the low pressure develops in the North Sea, some very strong winds are likely through the night across the coasts of northeast England. So that isn't helping matters, especially after the recent damage from Storm Arwen. As well as the wind, it is going to turn wet, already very soggy across Northern Ireland. That rain spreading into Scotland, and then a band of rain whizzing across England and Wales overnight, accompanied by some very, very gusty winds. The winds suddenly whipping up across the south in particular. It will turn colder, but that wind should help to keep the temperatures a few degrees above freezing, although it will make it feel cold first thing. There's very lively winds for a time in the morning across that northeastern coast of England, but it's a blustery day wherever you are tomorrow. Some sunshine, yes, but also plenty of showers, particularly in the west and across the north. And in northern Scotland, those showers turning more and more to sleet and snow, even to low levels by the end of the day. Elsewhere, the showers will be of rain, maybe hail, and temperatures back down to single figures. Add on that wind and it feels even colder. Bit of showery rain across the southwest on Wednesday evening, but then another little set of weather features just push southwards during Wednesday night. That'll bring a mixture of rain, sleet and some snow for a time inland over northwest England, perhaps parts of Wales as we head through into Thursday morning. With temperatures down close to freezing, that could turn things really quite icy on Thursday morning. Potential for a covering of snow, parts of the Midlands and possibly even for a time across parts of the south on Thursday morning. Once that's out of the way, many places fine and sunny on Thursday, but it will be cold. Another weather system will bring more rain into the west later on, but eventually also more milder air.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes